IPR in the discussions that take place in this room, the IPR that you have done that belongs to your company or something like that you're aware of, please notify it or let the chairs know at the end of this meeting. Now, there are other policies which are now presented in the Not Well. In particular, there are new policies which were defined for harassment and good behavior, code of conduct type of thing. So please have a look at the best practice documents which are pointed here. And there's also something about the copyright statement. And if you are in a bad situation about harassment, something like that, and there is now a group at the IETF that you can contact. And this is this ombuds team, which is very hard for me to pronounce. But there is a link here. There are people behind this link. So if you face a situation which is that you don't feel is acceptable, please contact the ombuds team. As a reminder, this is a classical IETF meeting, so your presence is logged. Please sign the blue sheets, which we are going to circulate in a few minutes. You will be on video, you'll be on TV with Mitico, so bear your best smile. And in the room, please sign the blue sheets. So we have our note takers there in the room. Dominique, Ines, I saw you. Okay, Jonathan, you're there too. Okay. So these are the usual links. The Etherpad link, the first link, is pretty useful. This is where our minutes are being taken. If there is something you did not understand, probably it's good to look at the Etherpad to see how it was captured. Same thing if you came to the mic and said something you feel is interesting, please check in the minutes that what you said was captured correctly, or your name was captured correctly. And these are a number of links to documents that are produced, pushed to other working groups, which in fact inherit from the work of 6TISCH. So you realize that 6TISCH does not produce so many documents, but actually our work is a lot about integrating things and asking other working groups to produce documents. And this is a list of things which are done here or in other groups, which are actually a product of... Oh, the agenda doesn't show, that's true. Okay, well, I'll put it up.
Can you put it up now?
I can. Yes, I expected the agenda for some reason is gone, so that's very surprising. So let me actually put it directly from the site. Should have been there, that's interesting. So, just before we continue, here is the agenda for today. Oops, it's not very readable. So we'll start with the blue sheets and the presentation I'm doing. Then we'll go through the chartered items. So we'll have the 6-step protocol, then minimal security. We'll have a small talk on terminology as well. There are a few updates. Diego will talk about SFX and Teng Fei about the minimal SF. Yes, why is it not on the website? Okay, so
is it
HTML. Okay. Well, maybe the slide I have on my, let me put it from my desk. I don't understand what went on, but I will put it from here.
This is what we want.
Oops. So,
it's from the...
I have it. Non, je vais y aller une microseconde. Something weird has happened with the PDF, which did not capture the agenda. Oh, DT. Sur cette feuille-là. Oh, d'accord, elles étaient marquées. J'ai compris pourquoi elles ne montent pas, elles sont marquées comme ignorées. Oui, si tu veux parler dessus, c'est bien.
Okay, so as we pull the agenda up, we'll have a pretty packed 1 hour and a half. So as a reminder, what I'm putting on here is the goal of the different presentations. So we start with some charges items. 6TISCH protocol is an ISG last call, so we want to inform our viewers about the revisions. Xavi is going to present this. We then have Balisha who will present minimal security, I think, which is the goal is to prepare for work group last call. This is something that has been pretty stable. Margarita has essentially 2 minutes to present terminology. This is just an update. SFX Diego will present us the editorial updates with discuss readiness for work group last call. And then we have MSF, which Tengfei will present, preparing for work group adoption. And then ASF, discussing how to best integrate ASF into different other documents. And so we had a pre-meeting just now, and Xavi, I think you sent to the mailing list some proposal. Next slide, please. The second part is time permitting, of course. So new work on global time, and so the goal is to assess the importance for the work group and discussing the validity of the solution. And then 2 drafts by Michael, one on the enrollment enhanced beacon and one was the role enrollment priority. And so I think those are presented together in one set of slides. And so we want to discuss the different priority fields. And there are some follow-up meetings following this afternoon that will cover some of these things that we won't have time to cover in the 90 minutes we have allocated today. So next slide, please.
Something weird again. It's not progressing as well. I'll come back to the normal presentation.
Yeah, so we'll obviously have to update the PDFs that are on site, understandably. So other work group stuff, 6LO role and core. Tomorrow at the 6LO meeting, we have a 40-minute time slot dedicated to 6LO fragmentation. There's a design team. We'll report on that, report on 2 different drafts. And then there's a draft called deadline time, which has a 6TISCH specific ASN time to do timestamping. Enroll, the discussions we'll have with Michael right after this meeting will be of importance for role as well. And then we issued a liaison to the core working group, just indicating that this draft here minimal security defines a new stateless proxy co-op option. So we just issued that statement. Next slide, please. A couple of very quick updates. This is more for having this inside our slide deck. So there's a 6TISCH simulator that was released an hour ago. So thanks, Malisha, for releasing this right on time. It's a pure, I'm going to present them because it would be silly to have somebody come up for 30 seconds, but it's a high-level simulator that allows you to answer what-if questions and provide some idea of the performance of 6TISCH, all written in Python. It's all open source under a BSD license. And it captures the full 6TISCH behavior. The idea, at least, is to capture the full behavior so that we can assess the performance of a 6TISCH network. Behavior means TSCH, of course, minimal security, Ripple, 6P, MSF, etc. It can run on multiple CPU cores. You can run it on a cluster. You can log stuff, plot stuff, and you can replay real-world connectivity traces. So if you have long-term connectivity traces, you can use that rather than a model for physical layer connectivity. Malisha, so the core team is those 3 people. The underlying names are the people who are here at IETF 101. So if you have any questions, please ask Malisha or Yach, who are somewhere. Next slide, there's a new release of the OpenWSN reference stack. 112 release was released yesterday and runs on, it should be 12 platforms, including the Open Mode B, which is this cool little platform that has both 2.4 and sub-gigahertz radios. Also a BSD implementation, and the 2 leads, Tengfei and Xavi, are here as well. And we actually will have an OpenWSN session right after this presentation, as well as tomorrow from 10 to 2. Next. Wireshark dissector, so just a state of the work there. Different people contribute with dissectors for different pieces of the 6TISCH puzzle. And so today's Wireshark dissector contains, we believe, most of the latest versions. I put in bold here the 6LO protocol 10 and Object Security 7 are 2 dissectors that are part of the official Wireshark release. I forget the number. If you want cutting edge, there are 2 servers that build nightly builds that contain stuff that are not yet approved by the Wireshark. Yet you had a comment?
Yep. Regarding the 6-stop protocol draft 10, that's actually the under review, but I'm sure that's getting merged soon
Okay.
by Wireshark.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That was Yasuki Tanaka. That's fine. Next slide, please. So we'll in the code lounge, we took advantage of this code lounge being open to have a couple of things lined up. So from 2 to 6 today, a lot of the people contributing to the work group are here today, so we had to pack today a lot. I apologize. So 4 to 6, we'll have a discussion with Michael around the 2 drafts that you've presented and how they integrate 6-ish with role. I'm sorry. 6 to 8, we have in the code lounge again in a session about the FInterop platform that allows us to do interoperability tests. And so we'll be discussing and deciding on the scope of the next interop test, the test description and the implementation, which Malisha and Marita will lead. And then we have some side discussion about score and 6low pan. From 8 to 10, we'll have OpenWS and friends. I say friends because everybody who works on open source 6-ish related stuff is of course absolutely invited. And so Xavi will present the Open Mode B platform. Jonathan will talk about multiple interfaces. Michael will talk about changing the interface to PPP. And then Yach will be there to answer questions about the simulator. And then tomorrow there's an OpenWS and Riot integration slot, 4-hour slot in the morning as well in the code lounge. At the bottom of the minutes, so thank you for the minute takers to take minutes. At the very, very bottom of the minutes, there's a highlighted section with a wish list. So if you want to discuss other 6-ish related stuff at those meetings, just populate that. They won't be part of the minutes, but that's just where we want to capture some ideas that might pop up during the meeting now. Next slide, please. So mark your calendars. There will be so it's the official title is the second FInterop 6-ish interoperability event will be organized. Thank you, Marita, for putting this together. It will be in Paris, 26-27 June of 2018. So those are the people that are organizing it. Margarita, Tengfei, and Miguel, and it's supported by some project. So the scope will be discussed today between 6 and 8. So if you're an implementer and tempted to participate, please come to 6 and 8. We'll discuss high level which are the drafts that we want to test during this event, and then we can start working on the test description. The idea usually is to have the test description ready 1 month before the event, and registration will be, if it's not open right now, it will be open in the next day or so. So we'll keep you posted on the 6-ish mailing list so that you can register. This is organized this is under the umbrella of Etsy. And that's, I think, the end. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we'll jump right into the core of the 6-ish core specs with the 6-stop protocol. I will ask the presenters to be quick. We have a bunch of pre-meetings, a bunch of interim meetings, so I think it will run smoothly. Xavi?
Hi, this is Xavi Vilajosana. I'm presenting the status of 6-stop protocol. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this draft is in ISG last group call. And we published answering some of the reviewer comments, version number 10. We had several mails in the mailing list, and we provide responses to all of them. But then they come back with another questions or clarifications. So I will detail how I will address them, not all of them, but I think the most important one, so you know the status. So Brian, for example, had a remark mentioning that there's a possible race condition in the 2-way and 3-way transactions, and would be good to clarify in the text, in the or in the transaction description, that in case that this happens, the inconsistency is then handled by what is specified later on another section. It's mainly a pointer to another section, so people know when read the draft that this will be addressed later on. Alex provide quite a good list of responses to our response, indeed. Some of them are already addressed, like, for example, adding the MSF to the list of scheduling functions. And some others are more clarifications, especially, for example, for figure 7 and 8, where it seems it's not very clear the meaning of the description. So we will clarify this part. And there's other parts that we think belong to or are part of implicit knowledge from 15.4, but he thinks that need to be clarified as well. For example, this last point here. When we have a cell list in a packet, in a 6P packet, to know the length, we have to know the length of the information element. So we have to go into the information element header, and through this length, we know how many cells are in the list. So this needs to be clarified, at least with a short sentence in the draft. He wanted as well some clarification on what happens if the candidate list for an add request is longer than what can fit in a packet. And in this case, our position is that this cannot happen. So if someone wants to add many candidate cells for an add, it has to be done in more than one packet. It has to be done in multiple add requests. Some other simple clarifications. And maybe one that's important is the fact that when we do a list command between two nodes, we need to clarify that the response for that command is the lists that are scheduled between them. So it's not a list that involves other nodes, but it's only between the two nodes involved in this transaction. Other points that are also mentioned by others is, for example, the fact that the sequence number, if it's a global sequence number for all the transactions, is a sequence number per neighbor, is a sequence number per scheduling function. So this needs to be clarified. We will do that. And we had implementers feedback as well from Lotte. And there were some clarifications needed from an implementation point of view. Especially, for example, saying when the scheduled cells can be used, and this has to be right after they are committed, in the sense that until they are not allocated, we cannot use. She provides as well some example text for clarification, which we think is good, and we will add. The same as Alex before, clarifying the sequence number, whether it accounts for a pair of nodes or a scheduling function, and clarify whether clear has to be used after a reboot or not. And in this case, we think it's not needed because a node first doesn't know that it has reboot, and if a clear is needed, it will be issued by the node is communicating with. Finally, we got this Nicola's remark on, he was proposing another way to handle the add transaction. His proposal is tries to address the fact that the minimal cell is congested at the beginning when we are booting, and then he tried to propose an alternative mechanism so we cannot lose an acknowledgement when we install that cells. We think that this is complicating the draft because this only applies to add, but it's not applying to the rest of operations. So it would seem strange to have one mechanism particular to add while the rest of mechanisms use another mechanism for transaction. In opposition, there's a drawback. His proposal works well for add, so it may improve the way add works, but when we delete cells, it would not work. The next steps we have is to publish version 11, answering all these remarks, and then waiting for the ESG final decision.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Xavi. So are there any further remarks? I don't know if Alex and Orlota are in the room, or Nicola. Please raise those now. We've had the meeting just before. These are all clarifying questions. So I think we can address them very easily in a version 11 that would be just addressing them and then pushing them, as soon as possible, essentially. Is that?
Yeah, we have most of these changes already implemented in the XML file, so it's a matter of publishing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is, in my mind, this is going exactly as planned with the ISG last call. We will just publish 11 that hopefully will be the last version that will go to the ISG. If there's is there one remark?
Lotte Steenbrink to Hamburg. Hi. I just have one minor remark. Thank you for getting back to me about my interpretation of like when to start actually using the cells. I was wondering if you could also, before you publish version 11, add a remark on oh God, I'm getting nervous. Right, how to react to missing acts, because I kind of started wondering like at which point do I actually figure out, oh, something went wrong. And I kind of drew something down. I could ask you after the meeting if that's correct. Maybe we could work on that, or would that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Lotte, let's meet, in the follow-up meetings, discuss your diagram, and then help clarify, and then report to the mailing list if indeed there's a change that needs to be done to the draft. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Javi. Let's move on to 6-TISCH minimal security. Sorry.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I will present the status of minimal security. We published 05 just before the cutoff date, mostly resolving some last issues that were previously known, as well as addressing one review that was done by Thomas. And the goal of this presentation today is just to go quickly through the summary of updates since 04 to get everyone on the same page, and to discuss the eventual working group last call. So the first let's call it major change that was done was to resolve to mitigate the vulnerability that was caused that would open the network to resource exhaustion attacks, but from malicious pledges. So the attack scenario was that the join request traffic gets forwarded into the network, and intermediate IP routers that use 6-TISCH scheduling functions act on it, and they may request additional link capacity in response to this traffic. And in order to prevent this, there was quite a bit of discussions on the mailing list on the best way to proceed, and we decided to use the diffserv code points in the IP header to tag the join traffic. And basically we decided on using AF43 code point for join request, and using a higher priority AF42 for join response traffic that is actually authenticated. And with this, it actually has precedence in the buffers if there is a collision in the routers between join requests and the join responses. We declared out of scope how individual scheduling functions react to this traffic, but we provided the recommendation that basically they shouldn't add new cells. And with this, there was a new normative reference was added to RFC 2597. The second change was related to a use case that we previously did not work on, and it's basically a JRC that is managing multiple 6-TISCH networks at the same time, and it's not collocated obviously with the 6LBR. And the issue here is when the join request from a pledge comes, the JRC needs to identify the network that the pledge is attempting to join. in order to, because all these the different networks will have different link layer keys. So in the join response, which contains the link layer keying material, the JRC needs to respond with the proper keying. And the resolution was that we defined basically the payload for the join request, and it's a CBOR array with a single network identifier element, where the network identifier maps by default to the PAN ID in the 802.15.4 header, but can be overridden by future specs. And as the join request maps to a co-op post, it can carry payload, so that is not an issue. We also had a discussion just yesterday on having this carried within URI query option. But so I would take maybe the opportunity from having core experts in the room, if this would be possible somehow to carry CBOR within URI query.
Can you indicate the context, Marisha?
So the context is that we wanted basically to use get. We wanted to use get instead of post in order to be able to do observes. But we still need to communicate a parameter with the get request.
Yeah, so Carsten Bormann, you can base64 encode it in a UI query, or you can use the fetch method.
Okay, so the fetch is then the way to go.
That allows observe, and it allows you to send a payload with a request.
Okay. Fetch. So yeah, and fetch is supported. Okay. Okay. So I will take that as an action point to dig into it a little bit more. Okay. Yeah. So because the observe would be quite useful for rekeying, for example. Because we would solve the rekeying problem just by putting the observe option in the request. And then
Sorry, so clarifying question, Thomas. So the node joins the network with a fetch rather than a post, allows it to add the observe option, allows the JRC to reach back out into the nodes to do things like rekeying. Is that correct? Over the same secure session between the JRC and the then pledge.
That's my understanding.
That's great. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
We're Michael Richardson. If we're going to define rekey there, then I don't think we should define rekey in this document. If we're going to use that mechanism to define the rekey, there will be some cryptographic statements to figure out how to secure that subsequent packet. I don't think it's complicated, but it's not a literal just send some more data. There's some other stuff that we need to do because we have the OS core layer there, right?
Are we talking about link layer rekeying or OS core rekeying?
Yes, those are both good questions. But I was talking about link layer rekeying. It's going to be a subsequent packet, but the point is that it's not going to have the same. It's not going to have the same contents as the first response. Yes. Right? Because it doesn't need to have.
But it will be carried over the same OS core session.
Yes, it will be. But the point is, we still need to specify some details of what happens, and I'm not suggesting that we should do it in this document.
Okay.
And it won't be identical to the response that we get, because the response that we get includes the OS core bits, the OS core response.
But it's just a CBOR array with different parameters in it.
Okay, I'm thinking that that OS core has some additional response that's derived from the thing that creates something. So maybe I'm mistaken, and I'm overthinking this. But anyway, so if it's really simple and you think we can define rekey there, then we should maybe think about doing that to completeness. But I'm hesitant to do anything that prevents us from going to working group last call.
Okay, so I see your point. Let's discuss this at the side meeting this evening. I think that would be a good starting point. The idea I had in mind was basically just to use observe to carry the key, and then with this we would need also to define a timestamp like the ASN at which this key will get actually used in the network, so that the JRC can hand out the keys before actually rolling out the new key in the network. But yeah, And then, so to continue with my presentation, the third.
Sorry, clarifying question about your last statement. This would allow link layer rekeying without any disruption in the network if we associate
Yes.
an ASN. Okay.
Yes, yes. With the current mechanism, there would be a disruption on the network, and because it's basically every node would have to request the key once it identifies that it doesn't have the link layer keys that are currently in use.
So it needs to fail first before it asks.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And then the third major change was editorial. I don't normally present editorial changes, but I would like just to get everyone on the same page regarding the terminology and let's call it the standardization scope of the document. So the first part was the first goal was to clarify the terminology and to allow basically future specs to override the identifiers that we use. We worked together with the terminology draft authors to define better some join specific terms. These all the definitions are in the terminology section, and in the minimal security we basically just list these terms with an addition that is specific to minimal security, where we use also terms network identifier, generic terms, network identifier and pledge identifier. And we map these terms to PAN ID and the EUI 64 by default, but we allow future specs to override these identifiers for privacy reasons or also the reasons that Michael outlines in one of his drafts. And these two terms are not in the terminology section. I added a separate section, identifiers, as the text is kind of contains the standardization stuff, not really the precise definitions of these terms. The second major editorial change was to the goal of the second major editorial change was to precise the scope, the standardization scope of the document. And with that, I wanted to clearly stress out what are we standardizing. And basically, the document is now separated into different sections that talk about the configuration of the 6-TISCH stack. So we go like link layer 802.15.4. We configure the IP layer, basically give requirements on neighbor cache management and also the joint traffic tagging that I mentioned at the beginning, and also the application layer, how to configure OSCore, how to derive the OSCore context, and also on the use of the stateless proxy co-op option. Pascal?
Malisha, for the previous slide, when you say that the network is the PAN, well, the kind of network we're building are really IPv6 subnets, and I was wondering if it would make more sense for us to consider that the whole subnet has the same security properties like keys, because people will move from one PAN to the other PAN inside the subnet. So my wild guess is a network is a subnet. It's not a PAN.
Okay, so I see your point. So basically, I mean, we need to different. I mean, this is an important question in terms of the architecture. The link layer keys, if these networks are not synchronized, if you get a reuse of ASN, you have to use the different keys for each 6-TISCH network, right? So even though they are part of the same subnet, they need to use different link layer keys.
They would be synchronized because if you want to move from one DODAG to another DODAG, different routes.
But
then you need to keep everything as is. So our discussions very early in 6-TISCH was that if you have a backbone, then the time must be synchronized between the routes over the backbone, and then they are on the same time. Exactly. That's what the goal was, to be able to move freely, to deploy as many routes as you wanted to, and move freely from one route to the other. Meaning it's one network. You keep your sense of time. You keep everything. So that was the design. That I know we did not discuss that for a long time, but.
Michael Richardson, I think that in the generic case, if we say that different PAN IDs have different keys and you need to perform a join process on each, then in the case where the keys are all the same and you can freely move from place to place, then that's just a degenerate situation for that.
I tend to agree. I would need to, yeah.
And once you have a mapping that says, you know, for PAN 1, I have key X, and for PAN 2, I have key X, because they happen to be the same, then I can move from PAN 1 to PAN 2 without going through a join process. But if I go to PAN 3 and it turns out to have key Y, then I will have to have a new key. But the point is that if I have those two keys already, I can move back and forth without a problem. And it's really just an administrative thing that he says, well, I've set the same keys, right? L2 network key. You're absolutely certain, even as Pascal said, the ASNs are synchronized such that we never.
They are not synchronized if it's in different bands.
Well, that's what his claim is, right?
Yes,
so
but
if
Mike, please.
Okay. So what we wanted to build at some point was a network with multiple DODAGs. Probably the pans would map the DODAGs, and have the routes being synchronized over the backbone, so that they have the exact same sense of time and exact the same ASN.
Okay, they're given it. Yes, they might be synchronized in the beginning, but because the time synchronization process keeps the network sync inside the pan. So if you have any kind of time drift there, they might drift away from each other. And because even if you try to keep them in sync, they might go off. And because it's a fundamental property that the ASN is part of the pan. So there is nothing. Yes, you could in principle do that kind of network, but it would be very scary to do that, because if you can end up having one time slot difference there, 10 milliseconds, then you actually have these issues that you fail to actually decrypt. You can actually decrypt the packets of the other network, because they are using different they're using the same key twice on same ASN.
But if you don't do that, then you cannot move freely inside your subnet, which would be so. The whole idea was the Ripple route are actually propagating the time, and they get it from the backbone over precise time or whatever protocol. So it's the way we provide time is along Ripple as well.
So I'd like to cut.
So what I'm saying there is it's actually very easy to just put the different keys on them. Because you have a pan, you have the key settings there. Actually, and you have the key source. You can have multiple keys there, so no issue in that. And you have to understand that if you actually part of the multiple pans, it's something that is not really. There is ways to do that. You can actually send interpan stuff in 15.4, but mostly you are assumed to be part of one pan in this. There's cases where you are doing that, yes.
We'll discuss. So Xavi's presentation about global time might revigorate this discussion about synchronizing different pans later on.
Okay, so let's continue this discussion on the mailing list, I think.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yes, and then about the second change, I'll wrap up quickly. Basically, there are now different sections in the document that stress the difference between the configuration of the 6TISCH stack and the definition of the 6TISCH joint protocol, as we now call it. How we map this to co-op, the definition of the payload, and the semantics of those fields that we carry. And then there is a separate section on the stateless proxy co-op option where we need core expertise basically for a thorough review. And then, yeah, so for the next steps, we have another plug test, as Thomas said, in June 2018, where we'll test the implementations. So every IETF, we come up with new issues. So, okay, for the working group last call, I leave up to the chairs.
So for working group last call, I think we're very, very close. I'd like to make sure that this fetch get post thing is well understood before we call for work group last call. I would hate to the work group last call would create a big change like this. So let's it doesn't have to be long, but let's make sure that is cleared up, that we understand what we're committing to before we do the work group last call. But that can be done at the end of this week if we're fast on the mailing list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There was a comment.
Christian Amses on the topic of the stateless proxy option. Do you expect those constrained proxies to carry at any point in time blockwise transfers or co-op fragmentation?
We haven't considered that use case, no. So
the answer to that question will indicate which particular co-op option numbers are suitable for for that
for
option?
for the ANA.
Well, actually, the properties of the option which go into the number.
Okay.
Suresh Krishnan as responsible AD here. So the it said it's under IESG review, so it's actually gone through a telechat, the OSCOR stuff.
Oh,
Okay.
OSCOR. Yeah.
OSCOR. Yeah, you're talking
Right.
OSCOR, huh? Yeah.
Right. Like, so it has gone IESG undergone review, and it's like currently being stuck on a discuss from a security AD. So one of the security ADs balloted yes, another one is holding a discuss, and like it looks very, very how do I call it, complicated, like the discuss, right? So I wouldn't get on it. Just go for it. Like, whenever you're ready to send it off. Like, and we'll handle it at some point, the reference further down. Okay, like either at the IESG or at the RFC editor somewhere before it gets published. But unless there's like 6-TISCH work needed, don't wait on anything.
Sounds good.
Yeah, just send it off.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Göran Selander. So I'm actually working on that discuss now, and I'm planning to send an email to the list. So I think it wasn't that complicated actually, but let's see what the security AD says. So we think we have addressed in a version we are working on all the issues actually, but let's see where we're going.
Great. Yeah. No, definitely OSCOR is needed for.
So it's the only work in progress normative reference, basically.
For this to be able to be used. Thank you. So I'm going to. Just to mention the fact Marita asked me to present 2 slides essentially about the terminology. Terminology is just following, not this one, just following the different new terms that pop up in different drafts. We did a full pass over it. There are now, next slide. There are now 48 definitions in our terminology draft. It's still a workgroup document, no change requested. This is just following the regular work. Next. It's okay. That's just a slide. Pascal, can you go on to the next slide set, please? There's no more slides. Yeah. Diego?
No. I just switch into this because you were not changing the slides.
Okay. But it's not the slide set.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon. I'm Diego Duhovne. I'm the editor of this draft on SFX. Where SFX is the inheritant of SF0, and SF0 is the inheritant of the original on-the-fly scheduling. Well, on this version, we have replaced several references. There are mostly editorial changes. We removed temporary sections also, and corrected many typos and style expressions which were remaining over there. Then we changed only the response list. In fact, the error management becomes now the response management, and we added new descriptions which belonged originally to S6P. Okay, so we adapted to the new requirements from 6P. In fact, the end of list, okay, the one which is added, okay, the sequence number will replace the generation check, and the cell list on the error from the cell list, okay, and what to do on the insta where it's locked, and the reset one, which replaces the RCR reset. Then we added the security considerations, which in fact is only explains that we are not defining explicit security there. This is an algorithm, okay, and a way of behavior, and so we trust on the 215 for security, and also on the security framework described on minimal security, which are other complementary documents. Then we added the section on scheduling function identifiers, which was needed. Okay? And this is the SFX one, which was required on the 6P draft, which is figure 5 here. And finally, we are willing to address all the requirements, all what was commented on the mailing list from Lotte. And since I have 8 minutes more than 5, which I requested, so I'm very happy. I didn't have it on the slides. In fact, I will try to mention a little bit about which are the items which are requested by Lotte. First of all, the allocation policies, okay, and which we refine to the number of cells, okay, and second, the number of cells on the cell list. Okay, we can use the new feature which is offered by 6P to request or to provide more cells for the negotiation process, the ones needed. On the whitelisting side, okay, we are trying to define. We will address this point also. Okay, then to re-add the number of cells to the whitelist after the ones which are not for those which are not added during the add process. The deletion process and policy should be defined also for delete and relocate. The time of measurement, which is one of the most interesting things to define here. We defined we created a wide definition because the timeout should be defined both for the 2-step and the 3-step transaction. And the boot behavior, the minimal number of cells which should be added at the beginning or or when the network was booted, in fact. And then there are some other small changes which are detailed on Lotte's mail, which are very, very practical, which I think they can address in the next version, which will be 02. Finally, just 3 seconds. Okay. Finally, we would like to, after the second version, okay, I would like to know if it will be possible for last call for this one, if it was possible, okay, to just round this draft finally. Just that. Yes.
Yes. I mean, we'll take advice from the room, and then I would like to talk to Suresh about this.
Yes.
Suresh, if you have a minute after the meeting, we'll chat.
Okay. Ready? That's all for me.
Questions?
Any questions?
Questions? No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Faye. MSF.
Hello, everyone. This is Tengfei Chang. I'm presenting the MS draft. I'm one of the author of the draft, and Malaysia and Chawe and me was present this draft on behalf of the whole team. So for the MSF, the first version is published in last year during the IETF 100 Singapore meeting. And since then, we have the comments mainly from Yach, who is one of the implementer of the MS draft. And this draft is implemented in OpenWSN, which is a firmware running on the hardware, and also the security simulator, which already present by Thomas before. And the 01 version is published in March 1st, and is present until during the 6TISCH interim at 2nd March. And right now I'm presenting the newest version. So the first comment for the MSF is the behavior when unreachable. In the first version is saying when a neighbor is declared unreachable, we think the node must issue a 6P clear. Now we change it to must as a may, because it doesn't seem the node required to send a 6P clear if it's unreachable. But in case it's a temporal unreachable, so we change must to may. And besides, the nodes must remove all the dedicated links, which actually the right term here is the cells. So we also change that part. So the second comment is about the 6P timeout calculation. In the first version is kind of wrong, and the right one is present here. And we just add these changes to the newest version. The third comment is for clarifying the use of the share cell. In the first version, we are trying to clarify the packets going to transmit on the minimal cell, and one of the type of packet is we're saying is the first 6P packet, but in real case is actually the whole transaction, which is the 6P packets, which is used for schedule the first dedicated cell. So we also apply these changes to the 01 version. And for the first comment, in the 01, in the first version of the MSF, we are saying the MSF is optimized for the application with a regular upstream traffic, which we indicate is from the node to internet, but the internet is too specific, so we change the internet to root. So here's the summary of the changes, and all the 4 comments we are taking into account. And besides, we update the return code, which because the 6P draft is already up to date, and also fix the typos. There's a section in the MSF draft. We're seeing the implementation status of this draft. Currently, we have this 2 implementations: OpenWSIM, which is the firmware, and the simulator, the 6TISCH simulator, which I mentioned above. So once and the result of those implementation will appear in this section. So here's the conclusion. The draft, we believe the drafted answer is a milestone in October 2017, which is the initial submission of the SF0 draft to the IESG. And now the draft is stable, implemented, and also tested in the simulation and also the OpenWSIM firmware. It's also presented during the last 6TISCH entry. And the working group states the change of to candidate for working group adoption. So here we are asking the chairs for the working group adoptions.
So this document certainly fits within Charter, that's for sure. Could I get a feeling of the room on how many people have read this draft? Oh, that's a good number. And out of those people, do you think we are good for work group adoption with this work? Please raise hand. Well, not okay. So yes, I mean, the people in the room seems to be ready, so we'll confirm that on the mailing list, I guess.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
So, any more questions about MSF? So we'll confirm on the mailing list the adoption. Thank you, Deng Fei. So the next presentation by Simon on ASF is, we're discussing how to best combine these different ideas. So let's maybe have the discussion after you present ASF.
Yeah, so I'll present the draft as it is now, and we can discuss it. So I'll try to be brief on the presentation so we have some time for discussion. So yeah, ASF stands for Autonomous Scheduling Function. I presented it first time in Prague, IETF 99. Wait, do we have a pointer?
We do. Yeah.
In a nutshell, yeah. Yeah. You always move on. Yeah. Thanks. There are two main ideas behind ASF. The first one is that you have autonomous scheduling inside slot frames. That means that inside a given slot frame, the nodes are going to calculate the slot offset that they want to communicate by hashing their MAC address. So they know where to listen from a hash of their MAC address. And then when you want to talk to someone, you hash the MAC address of the destination, and then you know who to reach. That's one main idea. And the second idea is that you separate traffic in different slot frames. So for instance, like a most basic example would be you have one slot frame that is dimensioned for your application traffic or unicast traffic, and another one that's dimensioned for the control plane with broadcasts. So the differences in version 1 compared to the last version are from based on input from the last meeting and mailing list discussion. Namely, we have a full definition of how to configure the slot frames. And we have a way to configure different hash functions to make this. That was a concern that was raised by Michael. That we were recommending SACs as a hash function. Now we make that configurable, and we have a burst mode to handle traffic surges. I'm not going to detail that now, but that's just an overview of how you configure an ASF slot frame. It's basically, you can see it as an extended version of the standard IEEE slot frame and link information element, but that adds a few fields so that you can define how the slot frames are maintained. So which node to hash the MAC address of when you want to compute, coordinates, which hash function to use for which node, that's the one called neighbor set for which node to do so, and how to filter traffic in a given slot frame. That's all detailed in the draft. This is an overview of the traffic filters that tell you again which traffic goes in which slot frame, so you can segregate. For instance, you could choose to say, oh, all TCP traffic goes to slot frame 5, but then all ICMP goes to a different one, and then your rules can depend on different parameters that include the frame type, whether it's unicast broadcast, the IP protocol, the port, etc. Configuration dissemination. So the current plan is that this configuration is disseminated using the extended beacons, the EBs, as one more information element, which is a 6-piece signal command. And this can be done in two ways. One is, so it will be done in EBs. One is to secure the EBs, but that means those are not the only EBs, because we need unsecure EBs for the initial joining. So that's one option, is to have both secure and unsecure EBs. Unsecure for initial joining and secure for the ASF dissemination, the configuration dissemination. The other option is to just piggyback the ASF configuration to every EB that are not secured, which is simpler because it doesn't add like two different types of EBs. Now, the other addition. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So just to interrupt you. Yeah, Militia. So by secure you mean encrypted or?
I mean both. But yeah, I mean encrypted
because the enhanced beacons we can't encrypt them. Yeah.
And we can't. I mean, they are usually authenticated, but
they are authenticated
with a well-known key, right? So it's
no. No, I mean, it depends on your network configuration, but with minimal security, basically you can use key. So I mean, in the link layer requirements in minimal security, we say that the pledge has to accept this beacon, even though it's authenticated. And it does not have the key. In order to get synchronized with the network, it accepts this beacon. So this opens a vector, which we discussed in the security considerations. But the beacon is authenticated and not with the well-known key. This was, I mean, we.
So yeah, I think there's room for discussion there. Even encrypting would make sense, right? So that
but observer, we cannot encrypt it because.
No, exactly. If you want to encrypt, then you must segregate.
But we cannot encrypt enhanced beacons because they carry ASN in the payload information element. And if that gets encrypted, you cannot synchronize with the enhanced beacons.
Yeah, those would just be like, you could just think of them as broadcasts that could be, they might have no point being EBs anymore. Yeah.
So you mean okay.
I think it's a fair point. Yeah, thanks. The other addition in that draft is the burst mode, so that you can handle peaks in traffic. So when you have a given slot, so you in ASF slot frames, you typically have a single opportunity to transmit in every slot frame. That's a bit too static for many scenarios. So if you have, for instance, fragmentation, you might have like 10 packets in a buffer queue that you want to dump to a given neighbor. So what we add here is that once you're, if you have multiple packets to send, you can signal it using the IEEE bit, frame pending bit. And when you do that, when transmitting, then if the receiver gets the packet, it acknowledges it. And if it's so that the bit was set, it's going to schedule a new slot at the next time offset, same channel offset, and listen once more. Then on the sender side, if you actually get an acknowledgement, you can, you know that the receiver is going to listen to the next slot, and you are going to use that next slot to send the next packet. And if you keep setting that bit like for 10 consecutive times because you had 10 packets in your queue, then you can send all 10 packets in a row. And just for the last one, you stop setting the bit. And that goes on until your buffer is empty, or until you decide to stop doing it, or until the receiver stops getting a packet. So that's how we handle traffic surges. And yes, so now for...
So clarifying question, Thomas Otena. So burst mode, mode A has, let's say, a long packet to send to mode B, cuts it into many fragments. So it's very useful to be able to send the different fragments essentially in slots that are consecutive. But if the PDR between A and B is relatively low, then there's a high chance that on the first transmission, the node A does not get an acknowledgement, at which point the burst stops, right? So this works beautifully well with high PDRs, and it's kind of a best effort tool for lower PDRs. Do you agree with that?
That's
statement?
correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
So now for discussion. So I think so. The two aspects I had on the slides were already a bit discussed, but I think what we really want to discuss here is rather what Thomas was mentioning. How do we best integrate mechanisms from ISF? How do we merge some of it, possibly with MSF? What do we do with the burst mode?
Yeah. So we had a meeting a little bit before. So you know, as you know, I think ASF has a bunch of cool ideas. If I list them, one idea is to hash the MAC address of the node you want to talk to, and so you have a automatic cell, you know, a rendezvous cell where you know that node is listening. That allows us to offload the shared cell in the minimal slot frame. That's one. Second one, this pending bit use. So in the 15.4 FCF field, you set the pending bit, which means, hey, I have more for you. Keep listening on the next cells. I think those are and then you have the different slot frames, and then the whole configuration of it with IEs that might be in EBs or not in EBs, etc. So I think it is very complementary to MSF. And so we discussed the idea of augmenting MSF with these ideas. But of course, it has to be worked out. And then the pending bit, it being such a kind of powerful independent tool, might be a separate document. So I think, you know, taking the raw ideas from ASF, forking that, having the pending bit be its own, you know, document that is, you know, generally usable, and then rolling the idea of hashing MAC addresses into the MSF draft, I think in my mind makes sense, rather than having two competing SFs, because I think if we do the integration well, that will perform better than if we had the two SFs side by side. So it's kind of a win-win. That's the current state of thinking. We had the discussion. You know, this is almost, you know, my co-chair hat off. Any comments about this? Any input that we should consider?
Militia. So I was just reflecting about what you said about the pending bit and the separate document. I mean, so you want the mechanism with the pending bit specified in a separate document, but then we will also need to schedule the cells. So this belongs to the SF, because it would be perfect if we would have the SF document that contains the scheduling part.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interleaved. Do you see my point?
I see your point. It's the bit option thing.
Yeah, I think it can be defined independently. So it really tells you that if a particular cell, that is a transmit cell, has a flag set, which is, oh, that cell supports burst mode, then when you support that cell, when you implement it, you are able to schedule consecutive cells as well.
Okay, so no, I'm just saying it's a bit mixing the logic of the SF with the pending bit document. But I mean, it's not. I don't have a strong opinion. I'm just raising it. We can work it out, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, if by we have now a cell options bitmap that contains 4 bits, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 reserved bits. I think what you would propose is to have one of those reserved bits mean burst, in which case you can use it wherever, and then in the case of the MSF or augmented, MSF, if you schedule a cell which has that bit set, then it just means you can use it for burst mode, and so it's a clean. But we will discuss. We'll discuss. Yeah. So I think we should have a side discussion on this. I think we might even have an interim meeting dedicated to that and proposing to the working group and seeing how all that integrates. Pascal?
Yes, Pascal here. This idea of having a burst mode was discussed a number of times long ago on the mailing list. So I would support that we dig the history we have on it. And I completely agree that it can be separated from MSF or ISF. One thing you could do to support it in this document in ISF or MSF is to allow to get more than one cell in the slot frame, but then decide with the more bit whether they are used or not. You see, so that's my answer to Manisha. How you split the work between this document, which allocates the cells, and the more bit, is that you may allocate more than one cell with your mechanism, defaulting on using the first one, or yes, they don't have to be in the right order, right? You can have the first one here, the second one here, etc. So you order them, and based on your more bit, then you consume them, but at least you can control what is the size of the burst and how the burst is distributed over channel and time, so you don't have to have them contiguous, which I don't really like. So benefiting from TSCH is distributing them all over the place. Using one, and if the more bit is set, then the more bit document will explain using 2, 3, 4, right?
So I have a last clarifying question. When you said the pending bit, in the next cell, you're going to send the next frame for that same neighbor. What channel offset or frequency are you using for that next one?
You increment the time offset.
Yes.
And you preserve the same channel offset.
Change same
is
channel.
The current proposal, but what Pascal was proposing, I think, is worth investigating as well.
Okay.
Well, the point is you can have a better policy.
It does make sense. It does make sense.
Okay. Any more questions about MSF, ASF? If not, then we enter the section, the last 20 or so minutes, 23 minutes about non-chartered items. And the first one is the global time draft by Xavi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay. So this idea comes from the fact that we have a synchronized network, and the synchronized network uses a, let's say, virtual counter or virtual element that provides relative synchronization between the nodes, but we don't have a global reference in time. As an example, if we have 2 different 6-TISCH networks coexisting somewhere, and they are sampling data, they are monitoring something, and we want to timestamp that data, we don't have a common source of time for all of them. They have different absolute sequence numbers counting, and we can know what's going on in one network, what's going on in another, but not one to the other. We think that having global time in a network enables many other use cases, even for security. So we thought, okay, what's the best or what's the easiest way we have to transmit or to spread global time in the nodes and make sure they keep their clocks with this global time sense. So what I did is I wrote that new draft. It was published the 1st of March, so very early, very soon. I got some comments at the mailing list from Thomas. I provide responses to that comments, but I think there are aspects that maybe we need to discuss further, and that's what we agreed. The idea, as I said, is to distribute global time in a 6TISCH network. My question to the group is whether you think this work is relevant to the scope and the charter of the group, and if so, let's take action on it. As a summary for those that have not read it, it's a very simple idea. We have a pledge node that when joins the network through the minimal security mechanism to join, it gets to the GRC, and the GRC, apart from giving back the keys and the short address, it also can distribute an optional element, an optional object that contains the mapping between the absolute sequence number and the global time. And this is what is defined in this part here. So this extension enables node joining to get from the JRC an absolute sequence number as a reference, an era counter, and the same sense as in NTP, a seconds, which is the number of seconds since 1st of January 1900, same as NTP, and diffraction, which is the number of picoseconds in the last second. So same notion as NTP protocol. And then it can transmit as well, optionally, an address of a time source node in case this is not the GRC, and link format identifying the service that is delivering the time. And then lease time in order to refresh that information. So the node can specify, okay, you have to come back again to resync after that time. And then we define a leap second option as well, in case there's a leap second and we need to correct it. So eventually, after one of these refreshes, this option can come, indicating a leap second has to be applied. And then the draft explains how these fields are used and how they are processed. This is the service. So Karsten asks what is this link format. So the link format is saying what is let's say the object in the server that I have to query to get that update. It's like the URL, the URI. Yeah. So this is configurable. So we can decide if it's a fixed one or someone wants to configure the name. As it is optional, I think doesn't hurt. So we got several points on the mailing list. I think the major elements to be discussed is whether Thomas proposed to remove the ASN and always relate the global time to the ASN 0.
So this is Thomas. I actually retract that recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the problem, and this is very much to Tero's point, the problem is that your 10 millisecond time slots are not always exactly 10 millisecond time slots. If you have a very fancy DAG route, which is linked to GPS or something even better, then you can make them 10 milliseconds. But usually those things are implemented on cheap microcontrollers that have a 32 kilohertz crystal. Maybe, my 10 millisecond time slot is 10.02 milliseconds. And so if my network started 2 years ago and your system tells me at ASN 0 that's what time it is, my ASN now is not ASN times 10 milliseconds, it's ASN times 10.02 milliseconds, and so I'm completely off. So I completely retract this. This was an error I made. So I think it makes total sense for the update to contain both at the ASN that much, it is that time. And then given that the ASN is not always, the slot length is not always perfectly 10 milliseconds, you want to do this over and over. So if you go back to your previous slide, what I understand is the pledge joins the network, it sends in join request, gets a join response, and a join response contains a bunch of things, but also this thing that does the mapping. And then that mapping is valid for wherever that ASN is. And then at some point, the join node, what does it do? It asks, it goes to the GT address, GT service, time server essentially, and asks for an update.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the second point was, sorry. Okay. Yeah, the second point was what you mentioned about the drift. So how we cope with the drift. And I think we have to do it through periodic updates, unless the node is like the dark route has a GPS and it can ensure perfect timing. And then through the optional fields, you can indicate that. So if you don't send the lazy time, for example, you can assume that you will never synchronize again.
Hey, it's George here from IETF. Maybe it's a stupid question. Can you give us some examples, use cases where pledge node really needs this information? I mean, why not ASN value enough to operate within a 6-TISCH network? You see, maybe it's
so to timestamp data, you mean?
Yeah.
So what you want to avoid is timestamping based on ASN. Imagine a wireless seismic data acquisition system, reading vibration to look for water or oil, and you tag every reading from the ADCs, and you want to transmit that. You can tag them with the ASN, but then at the server side, you need to map ASN to time and do this conversion with the post-processing. In this case, having global time, I think, is useful.
Okay. Thank you.
This is a use case that's not pulled out of thin air, right? This is a real use case that I've come across. So seismic acquisition systems where you want to measure at the same time. So you want to have a bunch of nodes that want to measure at the same time. Unfortunately, they're part of different networks, right? And so if those networks are not somehow coordinated, if the nodes don't know what real time it is, they will not trigger the ADC at the same time. So this is trivially technical. I mean, technically this is trivial, but I think it does answer real things. Yeah.
Militia. So just to add to the last point, I think this is also very useful for security, for the validation of certificates, as we don't want to rely that, like when we receive a certificate from an internet client or a server, depending on what the node acts, that it has to contain the ASN as the expiration date.
Thomas, again, if we start going into that route to validate certificates, it's really important that we trust that information, because now it's a vector for attacking the whole thing. So what this means is that you'd better be sure where you get the information from. And so as part of the minimal security solution, we have a secure session that's open to the JRC that we trust, right? This is a secure session. And so I think it might make sense to have what you call the global time source be actually the JRC. And so to our point before about fetch and post and all of that, Manisha, if there's a way for the JRC to reach out back to the nodes and give them a new key for rekeying, it would probably be possible to have the same mechanism to give the nodes an update about this mapping. And then that's secure. And then we can do certificate validation with that.
Militia, so just +1 on Thomas's response. Also, I'm looking at this CBOR structure now. I mean, you have the mandatory parameters. Basically, the first time when the pledge joins, you get the time, you get the global time from the JRC. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it means in this case, I don't see the purpose of having the optional parameters, of having the node now contact a different server. If you had the JRC already take care of that, So it could have just a separate session with the network server that's authenticated, TLS, whatever. So you just need, in the trust model, you would just need to trust the JRC and not now to extend it to the time server.
Okay, so you're saying that it's always the GRC.
I think so. I mean, we need to work this out a little bit more, but I think it's I think it makes sense.
Yeah,
Sorry guys, that's great discussion and we really want to follow up, but we have only 10 minutes left. So I'm sorry, I would like to cut the line and let Michael speak. But yes, I mean, we'll have a great discussion on the mailing list on that, and we'll have interims. So let's follow up.
So yeah, so to wrap up officially, so I think, Xavi, I think it's too early to call for workgroup adoption because it's out of charter. It's very simply, but I think there's clear interest about this work. What this means from us, Pascal, is that we need to figure out how this can be rolled in. There's some security things but so it might mean adding an item to our charter to just deal with that. But I think I think the room clearly encourages you. Please continue, and we'll find a way of getting this through. Next up is Michael. So you have both drafts in the same presentation, right?
Yeah, both are in the same. Oh, okay, I thought you were handing me the microphone. I just going to say I already have the microphone. In the join process, we have this issue that you have to be able to find a machine, another node in which to join. And so we have beacons that are sent out by lots of nodes. And we want to be able to indicate which ones actually support the join functionality. And then life has grown. So what's the problem? We have a big network, possibly many PANs. We have blue networks that you can see are connected on a backbone. And we have a green network, which may or may not be friendly. And the nodes, there's two brown nodes there, they hear many, many beacons from many places. When they're doing the join process, if they've tried the blue network, it would be nice if they didn't try the blue network 6 times in a row, thinking they're all different blue networks, but in fact went on to try the green network. Because maybe the green network is really the better network or vice versa, we don't know. So that's one of the issues. The second issue is, well, it might be that attaching at certain points to the network for doing the join or enrollment process would be better than other ones because there's more bandwidth, because the neighbor has more untrusted neighbor cache entries available, a variety of different things. So in the process of doing this work, a number of people, including my co-author on this, I believe got confused by the word join. It's my fault. I think join as being enrollment. This is how you get the keys to the network. This is how you start. Having done that, you would then decide how to connect to the DODAG. So for instance, I can use this laser pointer on the thing here, but no one else will see it. This node could here, and once it's got the keys, it could decide how to connect to many of those places. Malicious,
just to respond basically the term join, I think we use it in the minimal security somewhere, but what we mean, it's network access authentication plus key distribution in protocol. This
right.
is
that's what I always thought it was. Yeah. So the point is that there are some people in the last couple months that want to use it in the terms of parent selection, and so I'm urging them to pick the word parent selection for that discussion, and that I will use join/enrollment from now on so that it's clear.
I'm not perfectly aligned with enrollment, because for me enrollment is when enrollment into a different domain, right?
So I don't want to go deep on the terminology. Let's go to the mailing list. I want to point out that there is a distinction between that, and that's why I renamed the documents at some point, just so that I can be absolutely sure what's going on. So despite having done that, there was still a claim that we would like to do parent selection in advance of enrollment. And I didn't use the word join in either statement, okay? So, and it might be that you would like to join PAN 1 or green PAN rather than, you would like to enroll in green PAN rather than in blue PAN based upon some metrics that you observe about these things. So I'm not terribly happy about that, I'm going to say. I think it's mixing too many things into a layer 2. It's disclosing a bunch of stuff. But despite that, in my document, I have put these two things, a rank priority and a pan priority, which has something to do with join things. And I fixed this overlap in the pages, but I know that's just a little bit hard to read. So the question is, is this interesting to people? And what I've heard is that there's a number of people that are interested in this kind of stuff. And I think that you need to make a case for why it's interesting. And that's this part of the problem. Okay. What's there? All I care about is this proxy priority. And the reason I care about that is because a different of those join proxies may have different amount of resources. And it makes sense for them to say, I'm not really available right now for enrollment, or I am very available for enrollment. You get much better service if you connect to me, okay? And then the other thing is that the network may just want to decide that there are times in which the network does not have capability to support things, in which case it would send that proxy priority to 127 and say, although, I'm here, I'm a beacon, if you got a conversation with me already, we can continue. You probably shouldn't start with me because I'm not a good link. So tomorrow we're going to talk about the role part, which is how do we fill in these things? How do we communicate these things down? But I'm just going to jump to the discussion. What do we hear? So what is it we want to put in this document? And we need to decide whether we actually want to solve all of those problems at once or not, whether we want to adopt the document or not. As I said, I'm not enthusiastic about doing that, but I'm prepared to listen to arguments for why, goals and roles. So questions, discussions. I know we're pretty much out of time.
No, we have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I wanted discussion. That's why I knew there was going to be a mic line.
Yeah. So, Thomas, if you come back to those slides, to the slide where you have the different priorities, I reviewed this draft and sent you a review on the mailing list. I'd like to have a discussion about those 3 or 4 different priorities, those 3 priorities and the network ID. How exactly is it used and how is it managed? And
so I could go through that very briefly. So the proxy priority is derived primarily by the proxy node himself.
Yeah.
I would, for instance, take a value which the network might express through the role for the other thing. And to that, I would add some indication of how busy I am, whether it's based on battery or the number of neighbor cache entries, untrusted ones that I'm willing to devote towards proxy activity. And then I would come up with a number. So the network itself is going to give me a base number. Maybe it's 50. Okay. And I'm going to add, a number to that. So maybe I have 60 neighbor entries and I'm going to do 60 minus the ones that are available. So I'll get a number between, 64 and 120, yep. Right? So I might do that. The R bit just says I'm available for unicast. It's for leaf nodes, and I think we could talk about that later. So that's the pieces that I care. Other people asked for this pan priority, which would somehow be set to indicate which pan ID is more desirous for whatever. And not, and I can't speak a lot to how that would be used in parent selection. And then a rank priority, which would somehow be derived from rank, and I can't say how that people want to do that. Those are the 2 numbers that I've been told would be valuable to have. Finally, the network ID is a truncated SHA-256 of probably the DODAG ID, and that's just so that you can see that all the green networks are green and all the blue networks are blue without actually revealing anything specific, because it's just a truncated hash, so it doesn't really say a lot. But it does tell you that this transition is from a blue node, and this one's also from a blue node because they both went back to the same DODAG ID, so they both announced it. So DODAG ID is an easy thing that everyone knows, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be something else. We could say something else especially in the backbone router situation.
So you have reserved in the Code Lounge a session now. Is that to discuss this, or is it to discuss something different?
It's to have this conversation. I don't know, is it now? But it was this afternoon.
It's 1 hour from now.
Time between A and B, but
it's 3, right? It's at 4, is it?
It's at 4, which is now.
It's
at 4. Okay,
I
at 4.
picked 4 so that no one would miss any cookies. That was the only reason I made it. Didn't make it immediately after us.
If I can,
I want grumpy people, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so you're basically reconvening everybody interested in this to discuss this at 4 at the Code Lounge.
That would be wonderful. If you want to tell me what is it you would like to do with these extra fields, and how you think it's valuable, and I will respond to maybe the security doesn't work that way. So that's the conflict that I think I've had, is that I think that the security doesn't. If you don't want to reveal that information unless you've already enrolled on the network. That's my feeling.
Okay.
Were there other questions from the room be first?
Any questions? So can I ask, in particular, implementers and people who implement and deploy this to be present at this discussion at 4? So we can have that.
So the conversation tomorrow in role is how do we configure the proxy priority within the RPL DODAG? Okay, so that's a different kind of question, because it doesn't really matter what we put in this thing there, because I know I want a proxy priority. We're done. Thank you.
Yeah, we're out of time. Thank you very much. Please sign the blue sheets, and then let's talk on the mailing list. Thank you.